Before we start, I will just give some housekeeping messages. Please keep your mics muted throughout the presentations. At the end, there is a discussion. If you have any questions, please raise your hands and you will be unmuted. Or else you can post your questions in the chat box. Thank you. And now, to start the program, I would like to invite Engineer Mahesh Disanayaka, Head of the Research Division, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Dr. Inoka. Research is the foundation of knowledge. Very good morning to all. Director General, National Science Foundation, our resource persons, Professor Sunet Agampoti, Department of Community Medicine at University of Rajarata, Professor Ajit Alvis, Department of Chemical and Process Engineering, University of Maratua, our CLD coordinator, Dr. Inoka Sandanayaka from NSF, our senior scientific officers and scientific officers of Research Division, and IT manager of NSF, and all the participants. On behalf of NSF, I warmly welcome you all to the this workshop on how to write green proposals. This is the first workshop of series of 3 workshops arranged by Research Division of National Science Foundation, parallel to the Grant Call 2022. As you are aware that NSF is mandated to initiate, facilitate, and support R&D activities in universities and research and development institutions. The ultimate objective of this support is to enhance the quality of the life of the people in the country. NSF is very much happy to see the keen interest of our researchers to do new research, and we want to thank them for these initiatives. And NSF has evaluated research granted during 2005-2019 for their impact to the impact. So this evaluation was done in terms of scientific impact, social impact, and economic impact. So the results shown that we have higher scientific impact rather than social and economical impact. The scientific impact is 77% out of all scientific projects. That means they have given a good scientific impact to the country, whereas social and economical impact lies on 17% out of all grants. That means out of all grants, only 17% grant gives some social impact as well as economical impact. Now we believe, NSF believe that it is high time to rethink about the impact of research, because we need scientific impact as well as social and economical impact. The country needs that, because we need to give a good support to the development of the country through our research. So that's why NSF is always try to initiate, facilitate, and support R&D activities of the country. And NSF has selected some high priority areas parallel to the country needs. So we have grant call to research with good social impact and economical impact. That means we have to have good commercial value outputs and outcome through this research. So I humbly request our researchers, valued researchers, please design your research accordingly to have more social impact and also economic impact parallel to the scientific impact, so that we can give a good contribution to the national development or to the development of our country. So again, I warmly welcome our 2 resource persons, especially Professor Sunet Agampodi from University of Rajarata, and also Professor Ajit always from University of Moratuwa. Thank you, sir, for your kind cooperation, accepting our invitation, even though you have a busy schedules. And again, I would like to welcome all our participants because we want to success this effort without you. So that again, I warmly welcome you all to this workshop on how to winning research proposals, how to write a winning research proposals. So thank you all, and I hope that this will be a fruitful session for you all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dissanayake. And now I would like to invite the Director General of National Science Foundation, Dr. Sepalika Sudasinghe, to talk on translating research evidence into practice.
Thank you, Inoka. And also, thank you, Engineer Mahesh and the team there in the National Science Foundation, the Research Division, and also the others online from the National Science Foundation. And without missing and without postponing this, to have this workshop as it is planned. And let me welcome the participants also here for the today's program, specifically to two resource experts we have with you today, with us today, Professor Ajit and Professor Sune. So with that, actually, I think the head of the research division explained how important at this moment the research, because we know that research is, we have to, so this is the practice of the developed countries. If we compare the developed and the developing countries in the world, one of the factors, supporting factors for their developed status is the integrating research into practice. So actually, our effort also the same. I think the head of the research division explained very clearly how important you to develop your research proposals towards supporting the country's decisions. So countries' decisions in the sense, in supporting policy decisions. So I think I'm sure that our two experts here with us today will support the research, the panel, the researchers to design their research proposals in addressing, in supporting policy decisions in the country. So this is basically our intention, our expectation, and also the objective of today's program. So therefore, with that brief note, let me thank the organizing committee, heading Engineer Mahesh and also Dr. Inoka for your the work, and also the supportive team, working team, actually the supporting team from IT and from the division to organizing this webinar. I'm sure that this webinar will be very effective, very supportive for us to receive very effective, practical research proposals. So with that brief note, let me hand over to you, Ms. Inoka, to proceed further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Next, I will talk to you about the NSF guidelines for research grants. The NSF Research Grant Scheme. As was mentioned, the National Science Foundation is mandated to generate, disseminate, transfer knowledge, ensuring its effective utilization for the greater benefit of the people of Sri Lanka. The R&D grant schemes seek to foster the formation of multidisciplinary teams to conduct cutting-edge research development projects that are of relevance to Sri Lanka and the society. Now, if we talk about the NSF Competitive Research Grant Scheme, this scheme provides assistance to supplement resources available in the scientists' own institutions for research, development, and innovation activities. The aims of this program is to encourage researchers to utilize their knowledge for the benefit of the society, to facilitate researchers with postgraduate qualifications to enhance their career prospects, and to facilitate science and engineering graduates to pursue postgraduate research degrees. Grants are awarded in all fields of science and technology, including social sciences, management, and development economics. This year, we have identified 15 priority areas for research. They are eco-friendly agriculture, food quality and safety, post-harvest management, health and indigenous medicine, biomedical innovations, climate change, disaster management, waste management, water security, energy security, value addition to natural resources, community development and social innovations, management and development economics, applications of Industry 4.0, and biotechnology. This is the application form. I think most of you must have gone through this. I will not go through this in detail at this juncture, but if you need to clarify any of
Inoka, I think we lost your connection.
Yes, I think so. Sorry about that. Is my presentation visible now?
Yes, can see.
Any other member of the research group who does not meet these criteria would be listed as collaborators. These collaborators should provide letters of consent according to the format given in Annexure 3 of our grant application. Those who wish to read for postgraduate degrees under the proposed project are not eligible to be co-investigators. I encourage all investigators to be registered in our STMIS database. Institutions and recommendations. The institutions where the research is to be performed, the principal institution is where majority of your work is being done. Usually it's the principal investigators institution. And if some of the work is done in other institution, that should also be mentioned. The head of the institutions of both the principal investigator and the co-investigators should give their recommendations. The recommendation page at the end of the application should be printed and signed and then scanned and sent to us. Do not use any e-signatures in the applications. And for some applications, an authorizations are needed, specifically if you are working with human or animal subjects, then ethical clearance must be obtained. And if, for example, if samples are being collected from forests and wildlife reserves, then you need to get permission from these relevant authorities. And if the project has sample analysis to be done overseas, then you need a material transfer agreement. So these authorizations need to be provided in the application. But if you have not yet obtained those permissions, you can send us the application you lodged for those authorities, and then provide the clearance forms within 1 month from the date of the deadline of the grant call. Now, I will just talk a little bit on resource planning. I think this will be more clear once you listen to our resource persons. Just mention here that once you identify your project objectives, you have to break the objective down into smaller tasks and subtasks. Tasks are activities that must be completed to achieve each of these objectives that you have set. The tasks have specific start and end points. They are relatively short and significant. Now, once you identified your activities or tasks, it is easy for you to prepare the Gantt chart on one hand and then prepare the budget on the other hand. Now, identify the timeline for each. Once you identify tasks, you can identify the timelines. Some tasks can be done concurrently, while others have to wait for the previous task to be completed. And likewise, you can prepare the Gantt chart. I will come to that later. And also, once you identify the task, you can list the resources needed for the completion of each task and estimate the quantity of each of the resources and prepare the budget accordingly. This is depicted here. Now, once you identify the activities, that will help you in preparing your work plan as well as preparing your budget. And the work plan will also help you to give, according to the timeline, to adjust your budget. Now, if we talk about the work plan or the Gantt chart, it is a visual project planning tool that gives an overview of the project. It's simple to understand and easy to construct. They're usually used to represent the timings of tasks required to complete a project, as I mentioned earlier. Each task will be given in each row, and dates and time periods run along the top. Tasks may run sequentially, in parallel, or maybe overlapping. This Gantt chart is used to monitor the progress of your project effectively. This is a simple example of a Gantt chart. The activities or tasks are given on this side and the timeline given here. These activities, these are just generalized activities, but you can break them down into very small and specific tasks and accordingly set your timeline. Now, coming to the budget, NSF will provide funds for personnel, consumables, sample analysis, statistical analysis, travel and subsistence, postgraduate registration fees for research students, and miscellaneous. This time, we are sorry that we will not be able to provide funds for equipment. Please note that you have to avoid overestimation and include only the necessary items. And these items should also be justified in detail in the following sections. The personnel budget, it should be in line with current NSF payment rates, which are given at the end of your application. Full-time research students registering for a postgraduate degree can be allocated only for principal investigators with 2 or more years of post-PhD research experience. Technical assistance can be level or A-level qualified. For principal investigators who have not received any research grants before, this can be either NSF or other funding sources. Total budget should not exceed 2 million rupees, excluding allocations for research personnel. The consumables in budget justifications, the consumables, you have to provide a list with the descriptions of items required and the quantities and cost of each item. Sample analysis, if outsourced, then you have to mention the type of analysis and the number of samples and the costs. Statistical analysis can also be requested if it is outsourced. Travel and subsistence should only be requested for field visits related to the project and should be given adequate justification with the place, the distance, number of visits, and the cost. And you should also show the calculations for subsistence. Miscellaneous should not exceed 10% of the budget, and you can request stationery, storage devices, printing, photocopying, ethical clearance, etc. Please, you must pay some attention here that funding is not provided for consultants, drivers, OT and subsistence, administrative costs, payments for thesis defense panel, maintaining equipment, contingencies or unforeseen expenses, computers and printers for routine work, travel abroad, registration fees for overseas conferences and seminars, travel to NSF or COI's institutions for meetings or advertisements. These are some of the mistakes we have observed throughout the years in the applications that we receive. One is not following the guidelines that we have given at the end of the grant application. Please go through the guidelines carefully and adhere to the guidelines, and you can always contact us and get any clarifications that you need. And mentioning names or affiliations in the section B. We specifically mentioned that you should not mention any names or affiliations in section B, but we have found many applications that have done so, which is difficult because the applications go through a double-blind evaluation process. So it is difficult if you mention names in section B. And figures and calculations given in the budget are inaccurate. Totaling of the budget has not been done, or budget justifications have not been given adequately. Requesting drivers, OT and subsistence from NSF. A miscellaneous budget over 10% of the total budget. Again, requesting funds for contingencies and unforeseen expenditure. We see many mistakes in this budget section. So we would like to emphasize that it is very important that you go through your calculations carefully and see that they are correct. And sometimes we find outputs and outcomes are not clearly mentioned. We say that give the outputs in point form, and clear outputs and outcomes should be mentioned without writing long paragraphs. You can give them in briefly, and not forwarding through the proper channels. That is, for universities, you have to submit the application through the head of the department, dean, and then the vice chancellor. If it is a research institute, you can submit it through your institutional head. The signatures, as I mentioned earlier, the original signatures has to be obtained and not e-signatures. And supporting documents not attached, CVs, ethical clearance, and other authorization documents. Those are some of the mistakes that we have observed. So please be careful when submitting the application, go through the guidelines. If you have any query, question, you can contact us at any time through email, or you can call us. I will just give a brief overview of the process of NSF research grants. once the application submission is closed, it goes through internal screening. And then for external review, we send each application to two reviewers. And afterwards, we obtain the recommendation of the technical evaluation panel, which is forwarded for approval to the Board of Management. Subject to availability of funding. Benefits of being an NSF grant recipient: if you submit a quality proposal, you will obtain a research grant, and that will open up avenues for international travel grants, OSTP or overseas special training programs, NSF research awards, gap filling grants or technology grants, and also STMIS facilities. We have two award schemes. This NSF Research Awards is specifically for NSF grant recipients who has attained a high level of excellence in their research work. They are recognized for their contribution to the advancement of science. This is given annually for projects completed during the previous year. The final report should have been accepted by the NSF with very good or good grading, and also the final report should have been submitted within the 3 months period that we give at the end of the project completion. So you do not have to apply for these research grants. We will be selecting from the completed projects that satisfy our award criteria. Then we also have the support scheme for supervision of research degrees, or SUSRED. This scheme is to motivate, support, and recognize scientists and engineers engaged in supervising students conducting research in all areas of science and technology, leading to postgraduate degrees. This is given annually, and applications are invited through an open advertisement. We have about a month ago, we have closed this call for last year's awards. And that is the end of my presentation. This year, as last time, we will entertain only soft copies or e-versions of your applications. So the signature page, as I mentioned earlier, should be printed, signed, and then scanned and sent to us. The hard copy is not required at this time, but if you do need the hard copy, please keep the original hard copy with you. We will request for it if needed during the processing of the applications. Right. That is all for now. If you have any questions, we will entertain them at the end of the program during the discussion. Thank you. And now I would like to invite our resource person, Professor Sunet Agampodi, from the Department of Community Medicine, Rajarata University of Sri Lanka. He is the founding professor of the Department of Community Medicine and the department chair. He has obtained many local and foreign grants. So I think he's a very suitable person to talk to us on how to write a winning research proposal. I would like to invite Professor Agampodi to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Inoka, for the kind introduction. I would like to thank National Science Foundation for arranging this session, which I think a really good initiative to guide and mentor young scientists to obtain grants. There's a specific reason for this particular, that why I'm happy, because as a country, we do have National Science Foundation grant schemes. We do have NRC grant schemes, but that's an issue that very few scientists from Sri Lanka are applying for competitive foreign research grants, which are much higher than what we can offer within country. So if you are having a good mentoring program, your first grant proposal may be for your institution, and then for NSF and NRC, and then we should go for other competitive global grant schemes. So I think this is a really good initiative, and we'll share my presentation. Can you all see the slides?
Yes, we can see.
All right. And I can see more than 70 participants, which is really encouraging, which we have not seen usually for this type of workshops. And during this short presentation, I will not take you through a presentation to show you how to write a research proposal, because most of you are already aware, or you know how to write a research proposal, and you are in the arena of doing research, engaged in scientific research. But the next step would be how to write a winning grant proposal or research proposal to win a grant. So my this talk will be based on different experience I had with as a grant proposal writer, not with NSF and NRC. I haven't written grant proposals to NSF and NRC as a principal investigator, but I was a co-investigator for several grants. But I have experience with awarded grants with WHO, TDR, National Institute of Health, USA, Medical Research Council, UK, and National Institute of Health Research, UK, and then Bill and Melinda Grants Foundation sub-award through Engender Health, USA, and several other small-scale grants, international grants. So these things I'm going to talk about are based on those proposals I wrote, and also as a review of local and major international grants. So this will provide you a generic idea about how to prepare and what to do and what not to do. And I think this is really important for all the researchers to understand that if you're having a bad idea, it will be really difficult for a mentor or any other person to turn it to a good one. It's not possible. But there are many good ideas, really good ideas, which are not converted into good grant proposals because they are not presented in a good way. So this is what you should know. This is what you should avoid, because most of you are having I think all of you are having really good ideas or really good research questions or hypotheses, but turning it into a good grant proposal is the key. Again, this question we are having now, we do have thousands of international grants, national grants, and institutional grants. But when we look at our researchers, most of them, I think in our field, in my field, around only about 10 to 15% of the researchers are actually applying for grant. The main reason they are just not competent enough or not bothered to apply for grants. If you look at the applications, in and around 1 in 5 proposals, only 1 in 5 proposals, when you see a rejection, is turned down because of the idea is not good enough. All other 4, it's not the idea that is a problem, but the way it is presented. And the second point, please remember this one. Now we have about 70 participants or 77 participants here. A rejected proposal will teach you an enormous amount of things, which is worth about $1 million or more than $1 million of free advice. Why? You will be going through this process and you will get your reviews back, and then you will identify what is happening, what are the issues, and how to write the next grant, or how to improve the same grant, and then submit it again. And the success rate when you are submitting it for the second time is very, very high. And in especially in National Institute of Health, NIH grants, success rate in the third submission is almost 1 in 1. So when you submit your first grant, if it is get rejected, don't worry about that. It is common. So I had so many rejections in my grant throughout this last, let's say 2009 up to now, 14 years, so many rejections. And then I received grants starting from 20,000 rupees, Sri Lankan rupees, and up to 200 million Sri Lankan rupees. So still, even last 3 months back, I got a rejection from NIH. And we really believe that we are going to get the grant. So it can happen, especially if you are a new researcher. But don't get discouraged. Try to learn from each and every rejected grant. The idea is to do a proper job, submit it, and then learn from it. And there are a few things that you have to do. There are no exceptions. And this is why Inoka presented and discuss about the guidelines even before we are discussing about the winning proposals. So even before you start writing your proposal, you have to get the guideline, read the guideline very, very carefully, and follow the guideline, because each and every granting agency, they have their own guidelines. There are different ways of presenting your research idea. Some of these granting agencies, the presentation is completely different from a normal research proposal. So be sure that you know the guidelines, you read it, understand it, and follow the guidelines properly. So this is the first message. If you want to get a grant, you have to follow the guideline. And then comes to the title of your research project. One of the common issue I see whenever I receive grant proposals for funding, we get really, really boring research titles. So as soon as you see the research title, you feel meh, and you are not interested even in reviewing the grant proposal. So make sure that you might be having a really good research idea. You might be having a really good research methodology in the proposal, but the title is not so that the first impression about your research proposal may not be good. So all of you know that even though we are scientists, there are things that will change your mind. The title is something like that. Make sure that you have a really good title. So now let's say with my background, most of the medical graduates are trained by a community physician or public health physician in proposal writing. And in academic settings, we always say that you have to mention the method, epidemiological research method in the title, and so on and so forth. So we get research articles like a descriptive cross-sectional study to evaluate something. But for a grant proposal, if we see something like that, it is not giving us a good first impression. So that your title should reflect what you're really going to do and probably what is your impact. So whenever we read the title, we should get an impression that this is interesting and I should read this. And beyond that, most of the granting agencies, they screen through the titles if we are getting a lot of applications, and then decide whom to send this grant for review. Right? So if you are not reflecting your research proposal properly in your title, it might go to wrong reviewers. And if it goes to wrong reviewers, I think the probability of getting a grant, 50% is gone if it is not going to the proper reviewers. Why? If it is not their proper research area, they might be within the large scope, but if it is not within the specific area, they might not see it as a really good research proposal. So title will give you the first impression, but abstract will actually provide the idea whether this is a fundable research or not, or whether this research proposal should receive the fund or not. So believe me, when I say it's abstract that matters, so it's abstract that change our mind even before reading the method. So if you are going through a really good abstract, and if we see that there's a scientific merit, and also as mentioned earlier, if there is a social impact and economic impact due to this research, then we will have a mindset to go through it and find out how they are going to do it. And if we are already decided that this is going to be a good one, the reviewers will try to help you. Even if you're having a bad proposal, reviewers might try to help you to overcome these issues by pointing out some of the things and then probably suggesting how to improve methodology. But if it is not, if the abstract is poor, then again you will be having a very bad start, and the reviewer might not be really interested about going through it and finding it out. And mind you, most of the reviewers are very busy people. They have a lot of other things to do. And when it is like that, they don't have enough time. Abstract is the most important thing. And it should be a standalone document. So they should not be able to go through the whole document just to get an idea about what is there in the abstract. So abstract itself should explain the overall proposal. And we usually say it should be a publishable quality. So the results are not there, but as a proposal, it should stand alone and with a very high quality, and it should be very, very clear. Again, if I read the abstract of a proposal, and if I need to go through the whole proposal to understand what is there in the abstract, then it is not a good abstract. So it should be clear and concise, but not more than 1 page in most of the occasions. So most of the granting agencies will provide you with a word count or a limit. And usually it's not more than a page, single page. And usually we don't use first person, I will do this and I will do that in the abstract, but there are different schools of thought. So look at the granting agency, how they are doing it, and then stick to that particular guideline. And all the key elements should be there in the abstract. And again, I'm mentioning here, abstract should be a fundable thing. So when we read the abstract, we should be able to decide, all right, this is a really good abstract, this is a possible fundable research. So what is happening with research, or what we say the grant life cycle? So this is from NIH. If you look at the whole research cycle, you start from here. You plan the research. So you have a research plan. Then you are looking for your opportunities, grants. Then you apply for your grant. So if you look at this cycle, usually you have to have adequate time for planning, finding opportunity, and application. So after that, the granting agency will review and refer the application. And then reviewers will start going through the application, and then they will make the award. And then only you have to manage the grant award and then share results. So this is your actual research component. But all these things are part of grant life cycle, where it might go up to 9 months from start of planning and to get the award. So even more than 9 months, sometimes 10 months or 1 year. So you have to have adequate time to get a good grant. So if it is a small grant, let's say the institution grant, sometimes within 2 months, you will prepare the grant application, submit, and you will get the results. But what I'm talking about here is major grants, where you are going to do a good research with the major impact, social and economical, scientific, social and economical impact. So you have to plan very early and make sure that you have enough time to submit a good grant proposal. Now you have to read the instruction, not once, I think at least 3 times, even before you start filling out the application form. Read the instruction carefully, read the small prints, and then start writing your grant. There are 2 things I see in some grant application. We straight away reject some grants because they are not realistic. So when you see an overly ambitious grant, this is usually happening with inexperienced researchers. They wanted to do more and they want to show that this research is a large-scale research. But when it is too ambitious, when an experienced researcher looking at your proposal, as soon as they are looking at your objective and the abstract, they have an idea about whether it is a doable one or it is too ambitious. So when it is too ambitious, they realize that you are not having a good idea about what you are doing, and you will not they will not consider your proposal. I have seen this in small institution and national level grants, as well as international grants, even in HR and NIH. So last year, Global Research Funding Program, NIHs, I reviewed about 14 proposals because there were so many proposals for COVID-19. And I rejected at least 5 because they are overly ambitious. Right? So be realistic. So you have to have a good scientific proposal. We will come to that part later, but make sure that it is a realistic proposal. And especially now, thinking about the problem we are having in the country and thinking about next 2-3 years, what is going to happen, plan your proposals very carefully and be realistic about timelines, be realistic about what we can do with all the limitations. Otherwise, we'll be struggling with all the limitations you're having, which has happened to many grantees, NSF and NRC, last 2 years. And this round, reviewers will actually look at whether it is a realistic grant or not. Especially if you are required to get reagents from outside. And then you have to discuss potential problematic areas. So what are the issues that you will face? This is really important. You have to have these limitations. You have to think about all the problems you might get and then possible solutions and how to overcome those issues. Again, the problem we are having right now, you have to think it very carefully and then try to explain how we are going to overcome these issues. Most of the time when we ask about limitations and potential threats to your research, the investigators write a very generic answer. And if you are just writing a generic answer, it will not be considered because generic answers, we have seen it again and again. Now, let's say it says during COVID-19, when we say there might be some lockdowns, people might say we will follow all the guidelines issued by the government and then use personal protective equipments and face masks and hand washing facilities to make sure that there is no co-infection or outbreak going on. But this is a very generic thing. Even if we ask the same question from a layperson, he might come up with the same answer. So you have to provide an answer explaining how exactly you are going to manage your research within these limitations. And be explicit. Remember, reviewers can't read your mind. So don't expect reviewers to read between the lines because they are busy people. If you are not explaining something, and if reviewers can always think, all right, he's trying to explain this one. He might be doing this, or he might be doing that. But if we are to guess And if we are reviewing several proposals, we will straight away, keep aside those proposals which are not very clear to us. And this is again a common mistake. Sometimes we assume that the reviewers know what we are trying to say. Be very, very specific. And when you are writing your proposal, assume that they don't know anything about this proposal. And I think a really good practice is to give your proposal, once you write the proposal, give your proposal to a person who are not aware of what you are going to do. So this is part of peer review process for proposals, and ask whether that they can understand exactly what you are trying to do, or whether they are having problems. So if you do this with your proposals with at least 2 or 3 friends in your field, you will get, they will point out all the unclear areas, all the problems there you are having in your proposal. So it's always a good practice to peer review your proposal before you submit it. Now, one of the problems you might be having, or this is very common not only in Sri Lanka, all around the world, you are afraid of sharing your proposal because people might, let's say, steal your ideas. It can happen, but don't worry about that, because if you look at the pros and cons on getting peer reviews, I think getting good peer reviews is more important than worrying about, telling your ideas to others and stealing your idea by others. So it can happen. So it even happened to me. But again, I'm doing this for each and every proposal because sometimes it will open up your eyes and it will definitely change your proposal. So what is the question reviewers are asking? They mean they are going through the proposal. So reviewers might ask whether the researchers should do this. Is it required, right? Because they might think this is, there's no innovative thinking. And this was done earlier. And we already know about that. There are enough evidence for this particular thing. And there are previous experiments done on this particular area, right? So they might think, they might decide whether they should do it or not. And the second question, they might think that the researcher should do this research, but the problem is whether they can do it, right? So your proposal should answer both these questions. So you should be able to convince the reviewer that this is important, and then you should be able to convince the reviewer that you can do it. So first part, it is basically based on your aims, rationale, justification, and then finding out research gap and showing them that this is a required research. The second question you have to answer through your description of your methods and experiments, and also by describing your institution, your research group, and your collaborators, so that you can show them that your institution, your collaborators, or your research group can do this with the help of other collaborators. So when you're writing the justification, aims, and objectives, again, remember one probably rule of thumb. Anyone reading your justification part, at the end of reading your justification, they should argue that this is must. We have to do this research, or someone has to do this research. And even before reading aims and objectives, they should have similar aims and objectives in their mind when they go through your introduction and justification. Right? So if you can write a justification and introduction in such a way so that the reviewers can predict that these are the aims and objectives, so these should be the aims and objectives of this research, then you are doing a good job. And this part, it's the roadmap for your application. So you have to state the general purpose and then each and every key objective, and you have to include key data supporting key evidence, so previous research supporting your argument, and the hypothesis, if it is relevant, it should be there. And your aims or objectives should be in a sequential numeric format. And as mentioned again earlier, you have to tell reviewers what the results will mean and what will be the outcome and output. Now, this part I have added 3 parts which are usually not included as separate component of our proposals in local grants, but this is very common in international research grants. Even within the local research grant, even though we are not having a separate section on significance, we have to write this part, probably without having the subheading. Okay, so this will answer the question, so what? That is what question, that is one question reviewers might ask. So you describe that there's a problem like that. And the question is, so what? What are you going to do? Is it having a social impact or economic impact? Is it something you should research into? Right? So you have to write this very, very clearly. What is the significance of your proposal? So within this part, you can demonstrate that your question, research question, is a novel research question. It's important. And when you look at the published data, or when you look at the literature, your research is the logical next step in that arena of research. So to do that, you have to identify the research gap properly. To identify the research gap properly, you have to read the literature thoroughly. And remember, reviewers are experts in your area or of your field, and they know what is exactly there in the literature. So if you are missing some of the most important research finding, and if you are missing some of the most important research papers, you will be in trouble. Why? If you are not doing background reading properly, reviewers might think that you are not doing it properly, right? And it is not the scientific way of doing research. And you have to read, understand, and then highlight critical gaps in knowledge and mention that you are trying to provide this or fill these critical gaps in knowledge through your research. And then you have to show why your approach is an innovative approach. Okay? Because if you are doing the same thing which was done by several other researchers in the same area or same researcher within the same research scope, or then it will not be an innovative proposal. So it may be to refine or improve or propose a new application of existing concept or method, or else you can propose a research to shift the current paradigm, right? So if you can do that, it will make a very, very strong case, and reviewers will definitely going to approve your proposal. This part may not be valid for most of the small grants, having preliminary data, but if you're applying for a large research body, if it is a large research funding, showing that you have already done some work and you already have some data to as supporting evidence, it will be really, really helpful, especially NIH, NIHR, and MRC grants. They are looking for preliminary data. It may be your own work, or it may be through your literature search, so that you can explain your preliminary data, and based on your preliminary data, you can build your research. Then you have to describe your approach. So based on your research area, this is how you are going to describe your research approach or research method. So when you are describing the method, again, a common problem is that it is not in a logical format, or the sequence is not followed. You do something else and then you go back and do another thing. And sometimes the objectives are not within one umbrella. So you are doing several different, few different things. So explain how you are going to test your hypothesis, how you measure your variables very, very clearly. You have to define your variables and explain how you are going to measure variables and how you are going to minimize errors. So based on your research area, whether it is clinical research, epidemiological research, laboratory research, other natural science researchers, there are different methodologies. Make sure that you are following the prescribed methodology for your own research. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it should follow this rationale, experimental approach, anticipated results, and alternative approach, and pitfalls. You have to describe everything in your research approach. So this, the research method, experiment, everything will run under this research approach component. In your research strategy under the approach, you have to mention overall strategy, how we are going to approach of testing this particular hypothesis, then the methodology, and you are going to do the analysis. And again, very poor section in most of the research proposals I have seen is this analysis component. Researchers are unable to show how you are going to do the analysis. And if you can't describe, and if you are waiting for your data to do the analysis, that means it's not, most of the time, it's not hypothesis testing. And sometimes it's a biased type of analysis we see if we are not planning the analysis properly. And if it is involving human subjects, you have to detail all the components in relation to human subjects. So then there will be some approval process, ethical processes to follow, and also look at people and participation of patients or human, and then you have to follow all the principles as well. And if some of these things are missing, again, if these parts are missing, if you miss the ethical component in your research proposal, you might be having ethical clearance certificate, but if it is missing from the proposals, people might reject your proposal. So, what is an outstanding grant application and how you see an outstanding grant application? We will see as a reviewer very strong significant section. So it very clearly shows why this research is significant. How significant is this will be the finding, social impact, economic impact, and scientific impact. And then in my field, I'm sorry that I mentioned only public health because this is my field, but as Dr. Inoka mentioned, we are looking at social impacts and economic impacts. So if the impact is high, there's a very high chance of getting the funds, especially NSF research, but not only NSF research, even other research, it's the same. And you have to have high degree of novelty and innovation. You should be able to show that this is my innovative component. This is how I'm going to change the usual approach. And then you have to have strong track record of research, or if you are a new researcher, you have to have collaborators with strong track records to make sure that your case is strong. Because if you are a new researcher, even though you're having a good proposal, people might question, reviewers might question, this person has not done anything, he has not having good publication history, and therefore there's no credibility to this application. So make sure to have your track record properly, or have a group of people who are having a good track record of verified or well-qualified applicants, and then publication and research output. You have to have a clear rationale, and then if required, to have relevant and supportive preliminary data. And throughout the proposal, you have to have a very clear focus, and then show that this can be done with the proposed approach. And then give careful attention to details. Now, it's very embarrassing to see these minor issues in proposals when you submit proposals, like spelling, punctuation, grammar, fonts, clarity of data. These things make sure that you show the reviewer that you are a good scientist. Right? So scientists can't have this type of errors in their proposal, because we might think you might have the same type of errors in your research as well. So try your best to avoid those things. Ask another person to go through your proposal and make sure that it's error-free. And weak application, on some of these things were mentioned earlier, NSF, but overall in large granting agencies, after a grant cycle, usually we have these discussions about weak applications. So these are some of the weak applications we have seen. This is based on NIH. If you can't show a good impact, then it's a weak application. So if it is just a descriptive study, people might not be interested in funding your study. And again, if it is too ambitious, if it lacks focus, too many unrelated names, all these things I have mentioned, then it's a weak application. If the hypothesis is unclear, it may be clear to you, but if it is unclear to the reviewer, then it is going to be an unsuccessful application. And if we see that some of the expertise are not there, again, it might get rejected. I can remember some NSF applications a few years back. It was a really good proposal, but the person who is proposing, the investigator, lacks the appropriate expertise. So what I proposed was to, again, fund the research, but to have an expert in that particular area, particular field in the research group. And you have to show that this is a feasible one. If it is not, it will be a weak application. And so if you're having flawed methodologies and all, of course, it's going to be a weak application. And last but not least, poor writing and a lot of errors in your application. Now, if you're having figures which are scientifically incorrect, those things will also have a bad impact on your application. All right, so I think so I have given an overall idea about what is a winning research proposal. Again, first thing you should do is to go back and look at your research idea. What is your winning idea? And then make sure that your winning idea or good research idea is not diluted through a bad proposal. Thank you very much. Since I have to go for another session, if there are any questions, I would like to take some questions right now. There's a question, and when I have a rejected proposal with comment as not competitive enough. Yes, so sometimes, remember, some of the reviewers might not provide you why exactly they are rejecting the proposal, right? So if they are very busy or if they are in a hurry, and if they don't see that proposal is good enough, they might actually not provide you good feedback. It can happen, but sometimes you can write back and then ask, but if they are not providing good feedback, of course it's bad, but it can happen. And I have very many experience like that. I think we have a raised hand, right?
Mr. Madhav, can you unmute the person raising their hand, please?
Sure.
Please, when you pose your questions, if you have any questions for Professor Agam, we only raise them here, because we will have a discussion at the end where we will discuss all the other questions. Thank you.
I'm Kumari here. Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. And my question is regarding that the ethical clearance. So do we need to have the ethical clearance at the time of submitting the application for the human studies, because it takes time to get the clearance?
I think Inoka might be able to answer this question. Now, overall, in general, you don't have to have the ethical clearance at the time of your application if you have not collected samples. But in some cases, if you are doing a laboratory study where you have already collected samples, then you have to provide ethical clearance.
Okay, thank you very much. So for the new proposal, I think so it takes time to get the clearance. So
yes,
that's why,
yes.
Yeah, thank
so
you
it
so
should
much.
be part of your, Gantt chart.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Yes, but then you have to provide the ethical clearance during the processing of applications, because before awarding the grant, you must have obtained the ethical clearance. So we would appreciate if you can apply for ethical clearance and send us those details so that we know that you are in the process of obtaining ethical clearance.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Are there any more questions for Professor Agampodi?
There was a question posted in chat. It's about negative results at the end of the research. Now, this is a really good question. Actually, this is something we should talk about. Remember, we are scientists. We are doing experiments, right? And it is not guaranteed to have the expected results, and that's why we are doing experiments. If we know that we will always get the positive results or what is expected, then it is not going to be a research, because you know about that. So most of the time, not most of the time, there are so many failures in research, but there's a problem that when it goes for publication, journals, editors, and reviewers, they like to accept only positive findings, and there's a huge discussion going on in this regard, and that's why we are having separate journals for negative publications or negative findings. And please, if you are having negative results, try and publish it. Probably not in a high impact journal, because they might not publish it, but any journal, try to publish it, because it's important.
There's another raise hands, Mahendra Piris.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning to you, Professor. My question is, I have some preliminary data done on the work I am proposing. So if there's a time limit now, if has it to be a recent one, or if it is 1 or 2 years back done information and data and analyze information, still can you include that and how to include it? That is my question.
Mahendra, it will actually depend entirely on the field and what type of preliminary data we are looking at, because some of the things, even though the research study was done, the preliminary data is 10 or 20 years old, it's valid. I mean, if no one has done studies on that particular thing, if no one had used that preliminary data, and if you look at the literature and the research gap is still there, then it doesn't matter. So preliminary data may be 3-4 years old, but still you can do it. There's no way. In National Science Foundation research application, we don't have a separate section for preliminary data, so it should be part of the rationale and introduction section, presenting the preliminary data. And also within your methodology, you can include part of this, but some of the major other grant applications, they have a separate section for preliminary data.
Right, thank you, sir.
Hi, so I'm Prince here. I submitted last time and it got rejected. And so similar to the last question, the comment given was it could be one or more of the following: incomplete application, not according to NSF guidelines, PI not eligible, required details not provided, budget exceeds limit, or budget not prepared according to guidelines. If I write to NSF now, would I be able to get a more detailed feedback as to why it was rejected?
Yes, now that means your application was rejected in initial screening. So we go through the applications during initial screening to see that you have followed the guidelines. If you have not followed the guidelines, we reject them at initial screening itself. So your application has been rejected at initial screening.
And this is why I started with the guideline, because it happens very often. The guideline is the most important thing to start with. So make sure that you look at the guideline, you go through it several times, and then follow the guidelines. And there's another question in the chat box. What happens? So what can we do when a research student leave in the middle of the research, which is a common problem for senior researchers? And it has happened to me several times over the last about 10 years. So one way to overcome this issue is to have large research groups. Like, so not only that particular research student who is aware of this research, but you and other group members are also having. So if you're having a large collaborative research, so different research students are working on different aspects of the same problem, then of course you can take that data and then get another research student or someone else can continue that research. Sometimes you might not be able to get another PhD or MPhil student to complete that one because part of it is already completed. But others can complete those things as postdoc or additional research. That's what we are doing, but it is not the ideal solution. Of course, this is an issue that we all have as senior researchers.
I think we can stop the questions here and we can come back to the questions at the general discussion time. Thank you, Professor Sunetha Gampudi, for presenting an inspirational presentation. I think our participants have gained a lot from that. Thank you very much for spending your time with us.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now we will move on to our next presenter, who is a well-known presenter, Professor Ajit Dialvis. He is the Senior Professor of Chemical and Process Engineering at University of Moratuwa, and also the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies of University of Moratuwa. He is also the Chief Innovation Officer of the newly established National Innovation Agency. Professor Dialvis will talk to us on research in times of crisis, how to plan your research. I think this will be a very timely topic. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Inoka. Everyone, good morning. Inoka, will you permit me to switch off the video for the bandwidth?
Mr. Madhav, can you help?
No, I'll just switch off.
Okay.
Thank you. Let me share the screen first. Thank you. I hope I do justice to the requirement. However, maybe in discussion we can check. I'm not going to be quite specific in terms of in the planning, because anyway we're talking about a crisis situation. So either way, you can work within a crisis time, or your work while you're on, you may be facing a crisis. And anything could happen, right? Like we are anyway certainly living in quite uncertain times. However, the point is, as a researcher, and if you're very keen on research, I mean, like being a researcher and contributing, this perhaps is one of the best times in my view, because researchers are people who actually transform situations and enable things to happen, coming out of crisis and so on. I mean, this has happened over and over again in places. So it needs to happen in Sri Lanka as well. So when I take example, I'm just thinking along those lines. So it's the topic research in times of crisis, how to plan your research. Of course, I assume that as we have been discussed from Professor Sunet about writing the proposal, we are looking at planning your research and then thinking about crisis. How do we embed that? So what you see is that we certainly as Sri Lankans today are facing significant issues. And I kind of think that we are facing the mother of all crises, right? So we face severe power cuts due to lack of sufficient fuel, water, whatever, etc. And then, okay, now we are going to do research. Now, are you going to, how do you factor that in? I mean, we, Inoka mentioned Gantt chart, timelines, contingency money is not really a major part in the grant. You don't get to make it a traditional few percent point, but you know, contingencies are not really factored in. Then how do you do that? Now, this is where I suppose we need both the researcher and also the researcher be supported by the research management in that sense, the NSF, in order to handle this. So this is where the drive and the intentions and hopefully the persistence is very important, the attitude of the researcher. So, but the point is, can you sense that in your proposal? Can you sense that in your write-up? This is important. You do communicate about yourself in the presentation. Remember what Professor Sunet mentioned, the reviewers can't read the minds, the reviewers can't read between the lines. The situation of how do you communicate that? How do you communicate? You are a researcher of that caliber, that you are very, very keen in contributing or in managing these situations. Now, I put on a picture of a current research students of mine having the issue. You plan a biological research with power cuts and running a fermentation is almost impossible. And how do you, for interim periods, how do you plan out a UPS, factor that, and then try to ensure that you get your set of data? Otherwise, your Gantt chart goes for a 6, right? Today, all of a sudden, when a holiday is declared, we just can't plan, right? And then you end up with almost like a week of the holidays. So how are you demonstrating? No, to me, I'm 24/7 researcher, right? And this project is going to be my, it's going to occupy me, and I'm going to be in this problem and in the problem solving mode all my time. So these are the scenarios that we have to think. So if you are a researcher, and I hope that's what, and it is in that context that I sometimes like to see that research management, the institutes, support a little bit of a wayward behavior from the researcher, rather than trying to see very straitjacketed approach of writing that perhaps is not bringing out creativity out, right? And try to put them into a much more of a straitjacket. So we expect researcher is a person who see what everyone else sees, but think of what no one else thinks, right? You're thinking of what no one else is thinking. And that's the kind of person the researcher should be, because you're venturing into the unknown and you're going to push the boundaries in your work. And also when reviewer may decide, no, this cannot be done. But the point is, as a researcher, when you set out to doing a problem, you don't believe that this cannot be done, right? You are keen to ensure that it gets done and to find the answer. So these are some specific characteristics of a typical researcher should be. And these are the researchers who really change or transform the situations. Otherwise, you may be doing something in a very straightforward manner, getting the results that you're supposed to get, and probably also quite well known. and you may have concluded something and followed financial obligations and submitted the reports on time. And I sometimes see that it's not exactly quite useful, right? So, and also, of course, we look at culture of thought and work coming from the researcher. This is where the you don't really idle yourself just because the time has been given to you. Okay, today is a declared holiday, I'm going to switch everything off. And that's important because realizing results in difficult times, and we hope always research is a difficult enterprise. Not many people like to engage in this area. And we certainly in Sri Lanka do not call ourselves a researcher as my occupation. Maybe different professional words we use, but I never use, okay, I want to be a researcher. Right here, we are looking at, okay, researchers coming forward with proposals and getting them funded. So we need to appreciate this character called the researcher. And so it's important. Okay, so just to an example of what changes are necessary. Now, you know, we have gone from one crisis or rather the pandemic situation, and I see this project that happened at University of Peradeniya. So when you're Respiron Nano, so if you talk about the time of the pandemic, of course, if you look at the dream, the technique of prevention and trying to ensure that you don't get infected, M stands for mask. And okay, we need to do research on mask. Can we come out with a much more superlative mask with a superlative performance? Now, that is what came out of Peradeniya. And what I'm driving is the researchers responded coming out with something new or something with a new idea and demonstrating something and ensuring that it reached the market as well. And in that, they also received the support from offices like National Intellectual Property Office, because they were able to obtain intellectual property rights, not going through the normal channel, but because National Intellectual Property Office is also identified that they cannot run it the normal way for looking at IPR, and they accelerated the process specifically for these research that's relevant at the time of the crisis. And this is why not just the researcher, but also the institutes that are managing research needs to understand the value of pushing aside a bit some of the bureaucracy or the protocols that they follow. The researcher should be encouraged by such action that, look, I understand this issue. I am coming out with something different, and this is the area that I want to research. But of course, if the crisis is past, the relevance of the research may not be there. So we need to ensure that we also support fast track and help such research. Of course, the researcher, the very first thing is need to understand what I should be doing at this time. That's important. Should I be doing research just because to keep me occupied, to get my increment or get my next promotion or tenure or whatever, in whatever context? No. And I am a researcher here pushing forward a proposal to support the time, to understand and support the other people in distress. Remember, Mahesh mentioned that at the very beginning, that research so far has happened and the evaluation, the scientific contribution has been there, way up in 70s percentages in their analysis, but the social and economic has been very low. Now, we are all not talking about only just science research. As it was mentioned, it cut across from humanities to economics to arts, whatever, I mean, all the areas. And even in this scenario that you can identify different subject areas that you can research on to support managing the crisis, right? So it's important. So here was a classic example, I think, a researcher rising up to the occasion, or the team rising up to the occasion, connecting between Professor Gami Rajapaksa's group, then the nanotechnology, then the medical faculty, then the industry, then generating IP, then the so on, and ensuring that we have a product in the market. And not only that, I believe that this is also reaching out to some of the foreign markets as well. So it's interesting ending to a research project, right? And they claim it's one of the worst first. using these nanomaterials for antiviral activity. Anyway, so this is interest. This is what a researcher coming forward, delivering, and taking on the challenge of the crisis. So today we face. I mean, is this the picture of the crisis? I don't think so. This is a manifestation of the crisis, just one manifestation maybe. But we believe that this may be we are facing a mother of all crises from a national point of view. And can the researcher come forward and try to see how to help? Because can NSF also look at how can fast track some of these ideas to ensure that it reaches the ground level of implementation on time, right? That's important. So typical Gantt chart may not be of value in this, but the idea and the ability and the attitude and the opportunity to do so within the planned period of time is of the essence, right? Where the deliverable should be of value, and how do you plan? So the very first thing to me here, what I take is in planning, is your selection of what am I going to work on, right? So research is definitely is always of value, no question about it. We know that in a traditional wealth generation for a country, the research leads to via IPR, intellectual property protection, properly done, generates wealth. And that wealth is of much more sustainable to a nation or an economy than the wealth that is acquired through other means, right? And we cannot be very much proud of such wealth, but this is the real wealth. So from a research point of view, a researcher point of view, and if I use an economic term, we must look at intensive progress, not the extensive progress. Our research should be targeted towards intensive progress, where I look at bringing different skills and technology and so on, and get more productivity out of my work. I mean, that type of thing transforms, and that is the objective where I would pitch my research in. Knowing the research is of value, what type of research to be done. And here in Sri Lanka today, or if you take climate crisis for the planet, we are talking about research is very, very important. And we need to target areas where we actually help out to manage the crisis or come out of the crisis in whatever form. We come on top of the issue rather than the issue pushing us down. A researcher can well do, right? And that's what we should be. Then just imagine when Korea was in the down and the dumps in the economy after the Korean War, it was 40 scientists who actually transformed the Korean economy and science and engineering. Of course, the other factors did come in, but you can see the importance of looking at not getting affected by the crisis, but being motivated sufficiently to say that, look, what am I going to do here is something that I'm going to address, give a solution to this issue. And that's why I'm asking for these funds. And then, of course, the responsibility comes, how do you give these funds quickly so that the window of opportunity is not lost for the researcher to produce and the economy to benefit, so on. So the very first thing is identifying area of work. And this is what I would stress a little bit more here, because all of you who may planning and believe that NSF put the areas of interest today, maybe underlying line is, okay, how do you look at the economics, the economy? How do you change the economy from this situation? Maybe how do you strengthen the rupee? How do you make a rupee a convertible currency, right? Maybe that's a research for you to look at the roadmap for a convertible rupee for Sri Lanka, and not just hanging on to the dollar, right? So your research problem, and of course, some area that we need to be understand is scenario planning, right? The what if, and this what if is seriously looking at uncertainties. Now you can imagine how much of uncertainties that may come in, right? In terms of cost and so on. If you are going to break down your budget into sometimes about traveling kilometers and then to put that into the budget, you may find per kilometer values and so on are going to be drastically changing. Am I to take it onto a contingency? I'm pretty sure in the current way the inflation we are looking at, contingency 10% is not going to be the answer. So again, then am I to do the research in that way, or am I to look at a different way of doing the research? My intention should be very clear. My area of work should be very clear, but how do you plan it? So these are challenges that you will have when you do the plan. And even for the evaluators, the same problems will be there. How am I to accept? And in that context, of course, then one expectation is there would be flexibility in that assessment, that you are not judged on those type of errors that may have crept in because you have not really understood inflation, right? Because that may not be your forte, but your forte may be trying to look at your different research problem. So I would say this is where some flexibility in reviewing may be of use. So this is the quadrant, the 2x2 quadrant, that very interesting way of looking at how to select, and probably you can map your project into this. And I just stressed that in areas times of crisis, perhaps a particular quadrant is of more value than the other quadrant. Maybe two quadrants are of value. Just thinking, okay, what's the x-axis is useful at the end, right? Just think, what am I going to do is useful at the end from an economic, social, and so on, right? And these are the two values that NSF indicated that we are failing in terms of our research projects. The scientific merit, am I adding the depth of search? Yes, that's another one. Certainly not to be discounted, because that's what we do with this. We are pushing the knowledge boundary. Anyway, at this particular stage, you may have to ask, what am I really should be engaging in? That's important to answer. So let me take these 4 quadrants just to go through. So if I take, we may say basic research. The picture is our Niels Bohr, right? So Niels Bohr came up with the atomic model, and also looked at how that he basically indicated that electrons are not going to crash onto the nucleus. So the classical physics was changed by putting quantum physics, quantum mechanics, right? The concepts. Now, this is very basic research. Now, you may ask the question, now what I'm saying, in times of a crisis, we have a food crisis, we have a climate crisis, we have an energy crisis, we have quite a number of crises. Am I to go on to identify the address of an electron or something related to of that nature, right? So the question of basic research at this stage, is it of the essence, or should I park it for the moment and think of something different? Question that you should be asking. But certainly we know, if I can do something like this, pushing the boundary, I'm really pushing the human knowledge to a level that's really of importance. The point is, there may not be that immediately my answer may not help to solve a problem that is quite visible on the ground. That's the question. Of course, we have the applied research, and you can see the Edison, right? So this the Edison quadrant. I didn't invent the bulb, but I came up with the bulb that was working for the best of the best in the very first instance, right? So combining ideas and applications and delivering value, Thomas Alva Edison became quite famous. Now here is situation. We have a scenario of society having issues, and here I am researching on synthesizing from what others have come out with, or maybe connecting and seeing the synergy in trying to see a solution, and I really deliver value. My research will really deliver value because I see that A's idea and B's results and C's concepts, putting them together maybe, and my own, I can come up with something very interesting. And this is what am I now pushing for research. So you can see this area may be something that we should be looking at today, right? The applied research, where you see directly what am I going to do today has relevance today itself to overcome a crisis, because even to be in the future, we must survive the present. And if you just merely try to survive the present, the future may not be bright. So we must take control of the present rather than succumbing to the negatives of the present. And that's the message we should have. So hopefully the researcher would be very keen to get the problem, address these problems, connect with what others are doing. And I'm not going to do the very basics of it, but I'm going to be quite applied about what am I going to do. That's my proposal. We also have scenarios like disrupt research, right? So if you take Edward Jenner, for instance, Jenner came up with concept of vaccination. And because order of the day must have been prevention is not understood, the treatment is the way forward. And here comes a person who says, why not prevent, right? A concept of vaccination. And of course, he led to smallpox vaccine. And we know the whole science of vaccinology, take it for that matter, and then see the value of preventing, how beautiful that has been and how socially relevant, how important that has been to the society, right? Not just waiting for the smallpox and saying, look, I have a medicine for that and let me tackle it that way. So we know the value today. So that's disruptive research. And certainly, of course, disruptive research is of real value even at this time, because if we can transform ourselves from this pathetic situation to something different, because we find a different way of doing things, and I'm just coming out with a brand new solution to the problem, that's really going to be very useful. So we need disruptive research to transcend ourselves from a situation that is pretty bad to probably a situation of real strength, right? And so it's that type of research is of value. So here we are. We have 3 types I identified. Going back to the same 2x2 matrix, what is happening is most of the time we put this ourselves into this corner where I have put a question mark, right? Where I'm selecting a research project where I don't really add anything to the science, nor I am adding anything to the society, right? I merely research on something that I very well know the answer, or I do a little bit of incremental contribution. So please, considering that in Sri Lanka we have quite only a few that even think of research, and when you want to do that, I think we need to understand ourselves. Be responsible that this is not the quadrant that we want to pitch our problem. So perhaps that's where we should also not be funding, right? Because this is not supporting just merely an occupation to survive, but we need to fund research where we actually get a decent benefit and where we can proudly say, look, this is a research that we funded, this is the researcher or the team that did this, and as a result of this, we were able to transform. You can see the National Science Foundation USA, kind of like the popular the video that they put in, how much they are proud of funding few of the researchers that have transformed not just the United States, but across the world as well, right? Similarly goes for now, that is the scenario that we should build up, right? Eliciting proposals of value from the researchers, and it's researchers' responsibility to ensure that this is exactly what I am trying to look at, and this is what I am going to contribute, and also being responsible to the times, that is the needs of the time. And today, that's the situation we have. So very quickly, if I to take economics, just to switch away from a science a bit. So I just like to give this, like Paul Romer from Stanford, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics recently, kind of things that he has been looking at, how to ensure that the one lid fits onto the coffee cup. So the one lid fits 3 sizes, and then how the quality of work or the quality of life basically going to work improved, and what a transformation potentially for the American economy calculation like. So see, this is productivity, right? And so the project problem area can be in so many ways, because Sri Lanka offers so much of rich problem areas to study. So not just pure science, no engineering or medicine, but even if you take humanities and so on, or the analysis coming in, there's so much of things that one can do immediately to showcase where we are going wrong. And if we took this direction, we can easily change ourselves. So, so the project options are, project selection is very important, that I want to stress here. So I just gave this example of for Nobel laureate in economics, right? So considering ourselves, I mean, I remember this. I just remember going back to 2008, NSF came out with, again, like thematic things on fuels, specifically on biofuels, when the world was going through a kind of an energy crisis, because China and India were becoming middle-income countries who are really ramping up the economy, and their food habits were changing. And the food habit change in China and India resulted in an energy crisis. I don't want to go into the detail of it. This was 2007, 2008 era. And Sri Lanka also went into a hyper kind of scientific way of doing, okay, we need alternate fuels. So we ourselves were looking at all sorts of options, and this is an example of what we did. And what I'm thinking is, if our research or our demonstration, this was not new research, we were like in the Edison quadrant here, but demonstrating across the platform for the first time in Sri Lanka, across all fuels. So we decided, okay, I mean, this was a big team with industry coming in, Sustainable Energy Authority, NSF, and different private sector individuals. So we came up, okay, demonstrating the ethanol, how much of percentages that one can take. Now the point is, if you say even 1% of our import bill, it's a massive influx of dollars or the equivalent. It's a saving, big saving. It's influx to the UA economy, right? So we did branding, all sorts of things. And unfortunately, when fuel prices come down, we forget the value of energy resilience in the country. Similarly, this was another one, because we have petrol vehicles, we have diesel vehicles. So this was the solution, kind of like a semi-solution for the diesel vehicles. Again, all demonstrated from waste cooking oils to seed oils, and also ability to create the different economy. And agriculture scientists also worked on coming out with different varieties, and plantations were tried to work out on Jatropha. Different varieties were studied for yields and so on. So you can see it was not just one type engineering, just looking at engines and fuel, but across the value chain. If this to succeed, you need teams. That's what when the thematic approach was studied. So you need to have multiple research projects working on the area, so that at the end of the day, in a defined period of time, you get a better solution, because it's covering from the growth, the yields, the generation, what's happened to the soil, how the socio-economic conditions going to change, and the engineering or the technology of it. So this was interesting at the time, right? Demonstration right across from petrol to diesel to gas. Now this is again a pet area where we demonstrated with waste, and using biogas from Canteen Waste, running the three-wheeler, which was an LPG three-wheeler. So, and also biogas cleaning. Just imagine today, if this biogas, which actually Sri Lanka did very first with the village way back in 72 and 73, if that too happened, we have a whole crisis with LPG for cooking, right? It's so unfortunate that this is where the research has been lost in the sense of decision-making has been so poor. However, as researchers, we know we can do only so much, but the point is to make that impact as much as possible. You try to deliver. Now, again, if you want crisis, this particular one, we were planning for happen in 3-6 months, but the final demonstration up to the LPG took about 3.5 years. So I can imagine in the research funding came from the ministry. It was so fortunate that there was a champion. Otherwise, you can see the Gantt chart won't work, right? And every delay had a reason. And so, of course, did we manage it? But the point was, these are scenarios we need to understand. So this is at the end. where the waste, and then of course, the residue from a biogas process is always a very quality biofertilizer or a soil conditioner, and which also demonstrated at the time in the department, right? But we were not agriculturists. But what was interesting was we knew it's one of the most nicer processes where there are no such things as waste, and where waste is the raw material. And we also developed the regulations, and even up to now, these regulations are with Attorney General or somewhere. And this is working with the Sustainable Energy Authority. So you can see not only the technology, but even the law and the sides economics was also looked at. So the research, maybe in planning, you need to factor these things. What is going to be missing? Because if in a crisis, if you select a research title that where you want to ensure that you make actually a contribution, there may be other researchers who may have to have some parallel projects to support your work, and in turn you support their work. So this is why we need discussions between teams, in a sense different to what Sunet was mentioning about sharing the proposal and getting a feedback. This is about sharing the proposal and getting others in their own fields to come in and join hands to parallelly work with research, so that a thematic area can be strengthened and more results that's received is much more forceful and much more useful at the end. This is again was done. You see in a project, so the idea is very important, and in the context of time, there's in the funding. So in your writing, I suppose the best thing is to look at the scenario planning and identify what can go wrong, or what needs to be supported in changes that may happen, and how do you expect to handle that. And your character as a researcher in managing such changes can be demonstrated by the way you think. Again, something Sunet mentioned, that don't give a generic answer to a issue, but try to be creative in a way that you know exactly this is my answer if this happens. Very, very focused, very specific answer. That's important. But what I stress is, in times of crisis, the research project area is of very high value, and as a researcher, you must think along that. So these are examples, again, something where you bring in knowledge. So with a recent startup, I'll just finish now. It's a very interesting one, the world's first climate negative spirit, where the electrochemistry of research that was available outside was made use of, and developed something where carbon sequestration. So if you produce this alcohol at home from the carbon dioxide in air, this one bottle is equal to 8 trees. So imagine how much of economic disruption that can happen. The whole taxation system is going for a 6, because now you have homemade spirit coming up, taking carbon dioxide from air and turning that into ethanol. At the moment, that air is actually taken from ethanol alcohol factory. So there's a little bit of a difference, because then the carbon dioxide percentage is more enriched, and that is what is turned into ethanol. So the CO2 enriched air coming from the fermentation vat are collected in the startup by 2 people. So you can see a lot of science can be connected to deliver value, come up with products that are new. And sometimes the cost benefits will not happen in a crisis, because crisis is all about having been able to do something. It's not about just calculating and say, don't do it because cost benefits are not valid. It's like, so we have to think differently in times of crisis. And that's the beauty of research, where you don't allow CB calculations and all to guide the selection. Again, scenarios like we can see the opportunities for the country, unfortunate, again, a research where you see a country practice of like Philippines, they send biodiesel to vehicles in Germany, and then carbon credits are being taken, right? The entire plant is bottling, whereas we have these opportunities to transform our transport sector as well. But unfortunately, this is where we are not pitching science very strongly, or the technology. And this is what the institution should do. So one thing I would stress is, this day and age, with lots of support, you need to do your search very much better. Just getting the example from our Nobel laureate in graphene, Kostya Novoselov, it's a very interesting thing. He said he has searched totally across. And then he gives one example of an obscure journal, Tanso, right? And it means graphite. So he searched for graphite, right across in many places. And so his search has been very thorough in this research. Now, when such a presentation is also done, when your search has been so thorough and you demonstrate your absolute understanding of the problem, and anyway, this resulted in Nobel Prize and at a very young age too. You communicate the grasp of the problem and your attitude towards solutions, and also your attitude that you don't believe that my answer is the first answer, that I have searched far and wide and acquired all what is there to know, and then I am proposing that, and that communicates value to the reviewer, and it's quite strong. So search is very important in the proposal, and so on. So research to be successful, this is what I would expect from NSF to change. The accelerated approval and support of the funders is very important. And sometimes in these rejections at the front end, because of maybe not adhering to a set of principles, few of that, I think in times of crisis, when you need to get answers or researchers to work on a solution, some of these small mistakes, I think should be avoided, it should be waved away, and approval should be given based on the researcher's intensity of understanding and the passion that he or she is demonstrating to do the research. And I think that should be the way to go. And that's the principle in startups. Startups don't look at all the calculations. Startups look at the passion of the communication person who communicates to support. And that's how the economies have changed. So research also should not lack the potential in scaling up, because in times of crisis, when we are trying to give a solution, if that cannot be scaled up, of course, then we do have a problem. Pure research is not that sufficient in this case. So you need to show that, okay, what am I doing is of easy to scale up or can be implemented. So that is up to the researcher to demonstrate that in the proposal. Also looked at intellectual property considerations. Remember that if you do IPR and protected, and you can see that the first example I showed, that National Intellectual Property Office supported to fast track the IPR process, thereby giving the researcher a head start. And that's very important. So institutions should work together, and researcher must reach out and try to extract such facilities. So again, more than one research proposal. If you think your proposal is supported by some other research is also happening, there's maybe the support for additional research projects to be generated in supporting you. But of course, then the support from the institution is going thematic and considering both or the other rest of the research proposals in the same area together. So because jointly, they have more chances of being of value than in isolation. Of course, there is serious research management support needed, not in terms of ticking boxes, but more so from if you are given a research support for a project, I suppose you need a person at the institution who actually holds hands in supporting on the long run, rather than looking only at the progress review reports. So this is something perhaps that we need change. And the best example, again, is going back to Korea, where the research management for the initial phase for the country's change, there was a dramatic research management support by embedding even a research supporter, management supporter within the team, and allowing the researchers to research. In final, in terms of crisis, I like this, you see your research is of value, and whatever you do, if you just benefit from the given handouts, then the country is not seen whether you are present or absent, right? So country only sees that whether you are present, and your presence is seen by the work that you do and the impact that you make. And researcher has that potential to do. And in times of crisis, the way you approach that crisis with your research mindset will demonstrate whether you have served or moved away from the place or the crisis. So thank you very much, Inoka.
Thank you, Professor Diavis, for that very enlightening presentation and for opening the eyes of the researchers regarding the importance of doing applied research in a time like this. And of course, thank you very much for the pointers to NSF also. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can open this discussion for questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hands, or else you can post the questions in the chat box. There was one question earlier regarding a comment that was received at the last call. Of course, that particular instance, the application would have been rejected at initial screening, but if you can contact us on a working day, we can see what has actually happened. And also, there has been a small mistake in the email that was circulated regarding workshop number 2, which is scheduled to happen on 4th of May. The link was, the link led to workshop 1, the link for pre-registration. So we will be circulating a new email. If anyone who wanted to attend workshop number 2, you can register using that link. There was another question asking whether the online application has to go through the head dean vice chancellor. No, the answer is, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you can take a printout of the signature page, then get it signed and then scan and send to us. You can email the soft copy of your application. It does not have to be forwarded through the vice chancellor. You can email that to us, but get the signatures on the hard copy and scan and send it.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the workshop. So I'm Kumari regarding that the budget. So can we plan the budget with the collaborating the person, because some we be unable to get all the required money from the NSF grant. So can we have such the arrangement in the proposal?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. We do encourage conversations like that. There is a annex, I think it is annex 2 in the application where the collaborator can mention funding that they will provide. So, and the application, you can mention the funding that you are seeking from NSF. We do encourage such collaborative projects.
I mean, foreign collaborating as well. So it's fine.
Yes.
Local and
only thing when there are foreign collaborators, if there's you have to discuss and come to a consensus regarding IP rights and then material transfer if it is there.
Thank you so much.
I have 2 questions, budget related. One is for the miscellaneous. Is it 10% out of the total budget or 10% out of the non-personnel budget?
10% of the total budget.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is for things that we are ordering, like consumables, is the researcher allowed to purchase from outside, like let's say Amazon or eBay, or do we have to go through the university procurement system?
That would depend on your university regulations. Some universities, like I think University of Muratua do allow direct purchasing, but that will be totally up to the university regulations, because we will provide the funds, but you have to go through your procedures at the university or your research institute for purchasing.
Okay, thank you.
There is a question in the chat box. This time the researcher has to provide bank draft for 10%. No, the bank draft is for non-state sector applicants. State sector applicants do not have to provide any bank drafts, but any non-state sector or non-governmental organizations, if they are applying as principal investigators for research grants, then you have to provide a bank draft for the total 10% of the total budget. Any more questions?
I am Mahendra Piris again. Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Sir, now I am Mahendra Piris. I think you know me. Now, if there's a research which can give immediate results to the present crisis, say, way of earning more dollars to the country. Actually, you know that I am working in the industry. So they are a part of my research, which if you apply today, by tomorrow morning, you will see the results. And within 3 weeks time, that is till it goes to the auction, you will realize the financial benefits also. So if such research are there, why should we wait till the grant is coming to us? Can I start it immediately and go ahead while the application is submitted?
Answer is yes. By all means, you have to do it, and you should do it and see a different ways, because the reason for the research grant application is because you are dependent on that grant to enable you to carry on with the process. So if you see that I need not depend, it's like you're funding your own work, and by all means you should do that. And make the statement that this is happening, and of course also communicating that what you are doing.
Okay.
I think by all means you should do. You should not wait for the grant to materialize, because the concept of a grant is a researcher who is keen to do something but are unable to proceed in the absence of some financial support. That's
actually,
the logic of the grant.
Yeah, I may be able to initiate it with some sort of my own sort of things. But to proceed with, I may need some support. That is my point actually here.
Okay, maybe that initial part you get the initial data and demonstrate it, and to scale up, you need maybe that's where you need somebody backing technology grant support, or even your company or the other, because there may be now, if somebody sees such a transformation very quickly and the ability, there may be funds or the support coming from different places.
Yeah, because I am telling this, we have some pre-done trials. So with that, we have got very interesting results. I mean, very sure results, because now this is done, and this is actually a matter of scaling up at the moment.
Okay, so you see, ma'am, Sri Lanka is keeping a lot of money for finding the best advertisement for the tea, promotion of the tea. I think it's much better. I mean, you have ready access to. There should be that money available from the tea board.
Oh, it's a long process. That is the issue, sir.
Yeah. Now this is the situation that okay, you demonstrate it and then push it forcefully, and must get the bureaucracy to change. I mean, this is what the US mentioned in the Sputnik moment, right? Putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade was the directive, come what may. And you didn't have paper pushing lots. You were focused on what's the desired goal. So if you want to come out of the crisis here, and then you have a kind of like an option, then in a particular area, then there should not be the bureaucracy once you demonstrate something. But that is of your convincing power also.
And actually, actually, this intellectual property protection comes second for me. Actually, now I have submitted one proposal some years back, but still it is waiting at the place. But still, I am not worried.
So then you are
go ahead with
still,
this. Can we get this fast track?
Yeah, Mahendra, but if you have submitted a application, then you can go with patent pending. No harm done.
Yeah, actually now
absolutely within the time period. Of course, you hopefully you are within the time period now. But you can work with patent pending.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, all the best. I mean, should do that, but write and promote.
Thank you,
be
sir.
scientific in the communication. That's important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Pires, we have not only the computer research grant, so we have a call grant for the technology development and startup also. So you can see that one also, and you can apply because we call only UI for that one. So you can apply for that one also. If it is already done research. If you have a
under same scheme, or is it a different scheme, sir?
It's a different scheme. It's a different scheme.
So I may need the information also. How can I contact and get the information?
Okay, you can contact me.
Can you just give me number? I can even write it down now.
Okay, 071.
Okay.
419.
Okay.
29. 64.
071 419 2964.
Yeah, you can contact me. So I will explain you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, sir? Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentations and the information. I have a small question, actually, a clarification. So currently we are having a research grant from a HEAD project. So we are in the middle of completing the project objectives and all. So we are thinking of to submit a proposal to NSF to look at some other possible avenues to continue our research. So my question is, when submitting a proposal for the NSF, for my case, so how I plan it, I think it's a kind of a general one. So we have set objectives and we have different other research aims and objectives, but how we merge these two? Did you get my question clearly?
Can you specify a little bit more?
Yeah, actually, so currently we are doing research to value add the gemstones. For example, we refer them as Geuder. So we use different technologies to enhance the quality of low quality gemstones. So we have come up. We have completed some research objectives, but we need to, we have identified some more research areas to look at. So my question is how we merge these two projects. We are thinking to submit one to NSF, and we already have a grant. So any idea or any advice from the experts members here? Thank you.
Mr. Vijayasekara, already we have done a research, and if it is it's already developed technology, if you want to do some more things ahead, you can apply for the technology grants. So it's not a research grant. It's a technology grant. You can apply for that one. So we have technology grants and also startup grants. I think best thing is to apply for the technology grant, as I understood.
Okay, yeah, I got it. And okay, we will look at the guidelines for that. Then, is it possible to hire MPhil students or PhD students for that grant scheme?
No, technology grant we can't give a student, because if it is a research only, we can give a student.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
Thanks
can
so much.
apply for a research grant if there's any more research that needs to be done. If it's technology development, of course, you can apply for the technology development grant. If there is more research to be done in that area, what you can do is you can present the results that you already obtained through your ongoing project. The preliminary data or the research that you have obtained so far, you can mention in the rationale or the introduction, as Professor Agampudi mentioned. So you can mention the results already obtained, and from that you can rationalize why you have to do more research on which area.
Okay, thank you so much.
I am Mahendra Beris again. Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, actually now this what I mentioned was part of my PhD research. So then what may be the position? Because that one part is regarding tea technology, that is manufacturing part, and the next is field part. But I thought of starting with the manufacturing part because it's giving instant results. So in the meantime, I want to clarify one more thing, because in a recent document, I say that TRI director has mentioned that TRI is the only mandated institute in Sri Lanka to do tea research, and no one else should do any research regarding to tea. So that is also another point I need to clarify. So these are the things which I'm worried about, actually.
My answer is there should not be a limitation of such. While TRI has the mandate in the sense of, I mean, they are basically empowered, and then they hold the CES and all that support. That should be their prime duty, but there should not be a barrier to anybody else working on the area. I see no reason.
Thank you, sir. And this now, so in that case, am I to apply two parts, one research grant and technology grant for this part in my PhD research?
Only thing is the research grants I mentioned in my presentation. If you are doing your own postgraduate degree, then you cannot come in as a
principal investigator.
Principal or co-investigator for that project.
Okay.
There's that limitation for competitive research grants.
Yeah, but in this case now, this can contribute to the present what is country is asking. So in that case, is there any room for me to go ahead with this research under your support?
Can you kindly contact us on Wednesday?
Okay.
We will discuss and see what can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Prasanna Pereira.
Yeah, doctor, can I know my budget is more than 2 million. So how can I get more budget for my MPhil program?
Sorry, what do you mean?
The NSF is giving only 2 million maximum, but my budget is more than 2 million. So in that situation, how can I do it?
The 2 million limit is for first-time applicants. If you have not received any, if the principal investigator has not received any from NSF or any other funding or body, then the limit would be 2 million. That also excluding the personal payments for research student or technical assistant or whatever. Yes, if you have already received other grants, then of course there's no limit to the grant amount.
No limit, right? Because I am studying from a university, so university has to apply for that, right?
And now, if this is your MPhil, your supervisors should apply for the grant.
It's I think the latest one is 14th May, the deadline, right? After
Yes,
that, after that I cannot apply, right?
No, yeah. Already we have extended the deadline by 2 weeks, so we will be closing application by 14th May.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
There was a question regarding collaborators. Who are collaborators? Collaborators are now there are guidelines given for being a principal investigator or a co-investigator. If you do not fulfill the given criteria for investigators and you are contributing to this research, then you can come in as a collaborator. Another question, I got the registration through one of my supervisors for this. I need to register for the next session too. Can't I use the given links? Yes, I think we have circulated all 3 links for all 3 workshops. I'll see if I can post the links for the other 2 sessions here. Any more questions? I have posted the links for the next 2 workshops, one on 4th May and the other on 6th May. When are you going to announce the outcomes of the grants? Okay, now this will, the processing of applications will roughly take about 2 months, but then after that, once we get board approval, we can announce the outcome. However, the outcome will greatly depend on funding available. Some of these grants will be awarded next year because some of the chosen grants would go for next year's budget. And then once the budget is approved, they will be awarded for next year. In the application, it says the rate of traveling is 25 rupees per kilometer. Is that the rate that we should use, or are there any updates on this matter? Unfortunately, this is the rate approved by our Board of Management some time back. It has not been revised as yet. If you use any other calculation, you can find out the university traveling rate. I think it's somewhere around 60 or 65. I'm not sure. Check the university rate and you can use it. But our approved rate is 25 rupees. I know it should be done. Are there any more questions, or can we wind up this session? Yes, I think there are no more questions or queries. Therefore, we will wind this session up. I would like to thank the resource persons, Professor Sunet Agampodi and Professor Ajit Alvis, for their inspirational and enlightening presentations. And also, I would like to thank the Director General Director General of National Science Foundation, Dr. Sepalika Sudasinghe, for her advice, guidance, and support, and also the Additional Director, Dr. Tamara Dias, for her guidance and support, and our IT Manager, Mr. Madhav Pereira, for his excellent IT support, and the head and staff of the Research Division of NSF for their unstinted support and encouragement, and for all the participants for your active participation and for attending this webinar, even though it is a public holiday. I would like to wish everyone good luck with your grant applications, but do not be discouraged if you fail, because every failure is a step to success. Thank you. We will meet you again on 4th May at 9:30 a.m. for the second workshop in this series. Thank you very much.